Hello guys, my name is Thomas. When I tell people that I used to be a truck driver, they always ask me what stories I could tell them, or what was the weirdest thing I experienced. I always laugh and tell them that I don't have many stories to tell. I only have one, but that one story was enough to make me quit my job. It was a Sunday night, all the families were at home, enjoying time with each other. I should have been with my wife and daughter too, but my job didn't allow it, as I had to drive a huge truck on an almost deserted road all night long. I was driving along the cold roads, trying not to fall asleep. I was very sleepy, and even though no cars were nearby, I could leave the road and crash into something. I tried not to relax, but sleepiness began to overcome me until suddenly I closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them, the lights of my truck were about to hit a girl on the road. I tried to avoid her with a quick swerve, but I don't know if I had succeeded. I braked the truck and got out, praying I hadn't hit the little girl. I began to inspect the area, and luckily I didn't see any blood or bodies, so this was a good first step. I investigated the rest of the area, and to my astonishment, there was no one. In this part of the road, there was nothing but barrenness. There were several lights, so it was hard to believe that I had lost sight of a girl. There was simply no one. For a moment I thought I was crazy, that maybe I had slept too little or had just had another nightmare. I walked back towards the truck, but something caught my attention. From further back I could see the lights of the truck hitting someone. It was the silhouette of a girl. I ran towards the light, but again, no one was there. I looked under the truck, and there was nothing there either. The whole situation started to scare me, so I decided to leave. When I got into the truck, I was ready to start the engine, but I couldn't. The keys were missing. They weren't in my pocket, they weren't in the truck either. I looked down, maybe they had fallen in there, but they weren't there either. I looked up again, and that's when I saw it. The keys were on the outside of the truck, but as I looked at the keys, there was something else. Two eyes were watching me from the window inside the truck. I got out of the truck almost falling and ran forward. I didn't know where I was going. I couldn't get that far away from my truck. I know what I did was illogical, but I was terrified. At that moment I wasn't prepared to use logic. I ran as fast as I could, and suddenly the truck turned on by itself and accelerated towards me. I tried to dodge it, but my body didn't react. I was paralyzed. All I could do was watch as the lights got closer and closer to me, and my truck was ready to run me over. A few seconds later my eyes opened. I was inside the truck, off the road. I had fallen asleep. Was it all a nightmare? I accelerated the truck and continued driving, extremely confused and a little scared. I didn't realize it then, but soon after I found the red ribbon where the cargo was. The same ribbon that the girl I thought I had run over had. I didn't question what I had seen and dismissed all possibilities that it was all a big coincidence. My daughter never rode in my truck, nor did she have a ribbon like that. Today I'm sure that what I saw was real, and you know what? This was my first and last story as a truck driver. I've been a truck driver for over 20 years, and believe me, I've seen all kinds of things. I've seen some bizarre and unexplainable things. Maybe that night I've even seen a ghost, who knows? But believe me or not, the scariest things and the most dangerous being I ever saw was a human. On that Thursday night, I was on a long truck trip, but I wasn't working. I had just finished and was returning home. I had been on the road for several hours and was starving. I stopped for a bite to eat at the restaurant of a small hotel on the highway. The place was empty. I could tell it had only recently opened. Even so, it was quite luxurious, and that caught my attention. I had a good meal and I was ready to leave, but I had a setback. The truck wouldn't start. I made every effort to leave, but it was useless. Fortunately, the small hotel owner came out and offered to spend the night there, which I accepted. The room was quite nice and the people were very friendly. After telling my family that it was going to be a while before I arrived, I lay down on bed and closed my eyes, relaxed. I don't know how much time passed, but I quickly fell asleep. Late at night, almost dawn, a strange noise woke me up. It was something at the door. I walked toward it to see what was going on, and I smelled a strange odor. I went back to the bed to get my cell phone and contact the owner of the place, but when I reached the bed, a hand came out from under it and grabbed my foot, knocking me to the floor. From the floor I looked under the bed and screamed in terror. Two terrifying red eyes were staring at me from under the bed. I moved my foot away and went backward. Suddenly I heard a noise in the air duct. Something was moving through it. From a small opening I could see something slowly coming out. It was a black being with a distorted and deformed face. It was staring at me and trembling with anticipation. I could see in detail how saliva was dripping from its mouth. Once the being finished coming out of the duct, it started to walk slowly toward me. I wanted to run, but my body was paralyzed. What was happening to me? Screaming was not an option either. It was as if my body was not working. The being stepped in front of me and started to put its finger in my mouth. It was going deeper and deeper and applying more and more force. The pain was too much. I felt that it was going to tear me apart inside, that it was going to break my jaw. My heart began to race faster and faster in what I thought would be my last seconds alive. I saw something that totally disconcerted me. My cell phone was on the floor, and in the screen's reflection I could see myself, alone. In the screen's reflection there was no demon, no finger, nothing. I turned my head and looked straight ahead. I was alone. Slowly my body started to work and I stood up. I noticed that the monster was still staring at me from the door. I quickly grabbed my cell phone and with the camera on, pointed at him. Again, there was nothing. My senses began to sharpen and I discovered something I hadn't noticed. There was a strange noise behind me. When I turned around, I noticed a small tube coming out of the wall, and gas was coming from it. Was that strange smell I felt before coming from there? With all my strength, I rammed the door until it broke. I ran desperately and I got into the truck. It still wouldn't start. I was about to get off and run as fast as possible, but something came to my mind. That smell that I had smelled in the room, it had become very familiar to me. I got out of the truck and checked the car's engine with my cell phone. And at that moment, I understood everything. I called a coworker who was only a few hours away, and when he arrived, he dropped me off as close to my house as he could. When I was able to pull myself together to go back to the hotel, I went with several friends and pretended that nothing had happened. The hotel owner looked at me suspiciously and I thanked him for fixing my truck. As I was leaving, I told my friends everything that had happened. Actually, I didn't see any monsters. That gas coming out of that room was a slow hallucinogen that only a person raised by chemical parents would notice. What happened to my truck was not an accident. Someone had intentionally broken it. All these and the reaction of the hotel owner helped me understand that there was nothing paranormal going on here. Just a new hotel owner was trying to promote his hotel somehow. I was nothing more than bait. Someone who had to tell the story of a luxury hotel possessed in the middle of nowhere. To be honest, I don't know if that worked, but in my life this will always be an anecdote. I will never give that person the pleasure of being in the news. I am going to do what I do best, drive non-stop and tell my stories to a few people. Who knows who might benefit from them. What was the strangest thing that ever happened to you? In my case, I used to be a truck driver, so I have many stories, but one of them stands out from the rest because that was the only time I was truly terrified. I knew how to protect myself, but I couldn't defend myself from what happened that night. At least not with blows or kicks, since there was nothing and no one to defend myself from. That day I was driving my truck, nothing out of the ordinary. I was running late for my destination, so I had to go faster than usual. Unfortunately, I was short on time, even at the speed I was going. I had to find some way to get there faster. But how? While asking myself this question, I found a road on the route I had never noticed before. I looked at the GPS and the road seemed much more direct. How come I had never noticed it? I turned onto this road and continued my journey, now a little slower and calmer, thinking I would get there quickly. I looked to the side as I walked. The place looked pretty desolate, but there were some small houses very similar to each other every few meters. I kept driving and I began to feel that I must have already left the place. The route seemed longer than I imagined. As I looked to the side again, the houses kept appearing, but something began to catch my attention. The houses were not just very familiar to each other, they were absolutely the same. I took a closer look around, and that's when I realized not only the houses were identical, everything was the same. From the plants, the signs, everything. How was this possible? Surely it was a coincidence. All this time I had been driving straight ahead and I never made any turns. I took out my cell phone to check the GPS, but it wasn't working. It was as if something had cut off the signal. I panicked and accelerated, hoping to leave the place as fast as possible. Suddenly I started to feel very hot. I felt like I was suffocating. I looked outside and something had changed. Someone was looking at me from the window of the house. I stopped. I wanted to ask for help. The atmosphere outside the truck was just as heavy as inside. The heat was getting more and more intense. I was suffocating. I felt like I was going to die at that moment. I walked as fast as I could to the house, but even though I was only a few meters away, I was not moving forward. It was as if with each step toward the wooden door of the house, she was getting further and further away. The dizziness became much stronger. I was nauseous, and my head hurt a lot. I began to lose my energy. Nothing I did could take me to that house. Surrendered, I fell to the ground and closed my eyes, surrendering to a certain death. When I opened my eyes, I realized I was alive. The temperature was normal again. I could breathe. I looked around, but some things had changed. In theory, everything was the same, but the house, the road to it, and even the road had disappeared. And with all that, my truck was gone too. I took out my cell phone and activated the GPS. Now there was a signal. I looked where I was, and the cell phone almost fell to the ground. I was so perplexed. I was at the beginning of the shortcut, only there was no shortcut this time. The street I had seen there before was gone. I walked to the road to ask for a ride. I waited for hours, but finally someone stopped and gave me a ride. Since then, I never drove a truck again. Not because of what I had lived through, but because I was never able to buy another truck. No one ever believed the story I told them, and no one ever saw my truck again. It was as if I had been trapped in another dimension, a dimension that for some reason didn't want me, and allowed me to come back to my reality.
Thank you for listening to our story. We hope it gave you a good scare. If you like it, please like, share and subscribe to our channel for more spooky stories.